Grief isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of a new chapter. Welcome back to another episode of the Empowered Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, founder of the Empowered Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. Each episode brings real conversations with people from around the world who have navigated profound loss and found the strength to rebuild their lives with courage and intention. Together, we'll explore what it means to move from survival to integration, reclaim our identity, honor your grief journey, and create a future grounded in resilience and purpose. Walk with us as we transform grief into growth one story at a time. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to invite you guys to head over to empowergriefjourney.com where you can explore recent episodes of the podcast, grab your copy of the Empower Grief Journey anthology, and book a free grief clarity call to start your own Empower Grief Journey. Today, I have a wonderful guest with us. Her name is Jenna Taylor. She's a resilience strategist, speaker, and founder of Resilience Brilliance, a podcast and programs helping high achievers rebuild their lives after adversity. A 30 plus year entrepreneur and marketing leader, her greatest credibility comes from lived experience, surviving trauma, a life altering brain injury, and profound personal loss. Rebuilding from the ground up, Jenna returned to her independence and high performance within a year. Today, she blends neuroscience backed tools and real world strategies to help others navigate burnout, loss, and transition. Jenna's mission is simple: be real, be resilient, reclaim your life. And I just want to say I'm excited to have her on the show, guys. So you're going to love this episode. Jenna, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Chris. It's great to be here.
It was a real pleasure getting to meet you for the pre-interview a week or two ago because I cannot imagine, and I have not met somebody that's gone through a brain injury and let alone recovered in a year to get back to where they were. I just think that's so impressive and inspiring in so many
Thank
ways.
you. Well, I would say it's been more than a year of work, and I am a different version of who I am today than I was before the brain injury. And I think that's kind of a misnomer. People are like, I'm going to return to the way I was. And it's kind of like what I teach with resilience is it's not a comeback. I'm rising stronger. And that's what I teach the people that I work with.
I love that. Well, tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and tell us what led you down this journey.
Sure. Now, would you like me to start with the brain injury, or do you want me to go straight into my grief story?
I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about the brain injury, where this all
Sure.
started, and talk a little bit about that grief journey with us.
Sure. So it started on January 5th, 2017. I was skiing and my ski got stuck in a mogul. And what happened next defied all the laws of gravity. And as my ski got stuck, I was spinning. My body was spinning out of control. It was cracking and snapping. And then I just remembered this isn't stopping. This isn't stopping. This can't be happening. And then all of a sudden, my head hit the side of the mogul, and I hit hard, and my head was throbbing like this. I saw black and stars, but the real impact didn't happen on the mountain that day. It happened 3 days later. I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, and I had zero short-term memory. Zero. And this is when I learned I couldn't push through. For the first time in my life, pushing through didn't work because with a brain injury, you cannot push. You can't push. Just your body shuts down. And it took me a year. I used a lot of different modalities. I did cognitive therapy, I did physical therapy, occupational therapy. It was so bad, Chris. I don't know if I told you this the first time we spoke, but I thought I was hungry and I thought, oh, I can make myself a hard-boiled egg. Well, the backstory is I lived alone. I owned my own company and I had zero family support. So my friends stepped up and they created a meal train for me. And then this group of women, they became my tribe and my support network. They drove me to all of my appointments because I couldn't drive. In fact, I couldn't even ride in the car with my eyes open. I had to blindfold myself because when you're going down the highway and you have all this stuff going on, your brain's filtering all this stimulation. So I would be sick, I would be nauseous, I would be spent by the time I got to my therapy appointment, whatever that therapy was. And so I would blindfold myself so I could survive riding in the car. I mean, it was really bad. And now I've lost track of where I was going. That's part of my injury. Yeah. The short-term
Yeah.
memory is still a little bit damaged. I usually can backtrack myself back to the where I was, but I recently had another concussion, so I'm freshly injured again. So, but going back to, I think I was talking about the different modalities that I was working on, and I thought, okay, I was hungry. See, I did find myself my way back. I was hungry, so I put some eggs in a pan and I started to hard boil some eggs. Once I put the eggs in the water in the pan and turned it on, I left the room. I'm out in the bedroom on the other side of my condo doing something, and all of a sudden, I smell something, and I'm like, "Oh my God!" So the followed the scent, and I had smoke in my kitchen, and I walked up to the stove. I'm like, "Well, shit! I've got no water. I've got cracked eggs and I have a burnt pan." And I open the windows. I at least knew enough to open the windows when the alarm starts going off. And I had to write myself a note: do not cook. Because and when I looked at the pan, I thought, who the hell did this? And I looked around. I'm like, girl, you're the only one in here. So it had to have been you. So I left that post-it reminder on the stove as a reminder because not only is it, what was it, frustrating, but it was also a dangerous thing, right? If I didn't know that I had started the stove, who knows? Like I could have gone downstairs to do a workout and like things could have gotten really bad. So I had zero short-term memory, and I dedicated a whole year of my life to physical recovery and beyond. And I have lingering issues from that 2017 traumatic brain injury, and then I've had a couple of new concussions since then. So, like I said, like on Valentine's Day, I ran into a sliding glass door. So PSA, public service announcement. If you have a sliding glass door and you keep it clean, I recommend those prisms, and they sell all sorts of different colored prisms on Amazon. And all three of my sliding glass doors now have these prisms on so that I or someone else don't walk into the door. Yeah. So, and like, yeah, so after a year, I was able to work again. I was able to restart my business. I was a writer by trade. And so I started writing copy for IBM Watson Health. And I just kept getting more projects. And that then became my therapy, my cognitive therapy, because I couldn't form words. And I thought, how am I going to be able to write copy for, top companies like I was and had been doing? And I was able to figure out how to reconnect those neural pathways. And I was able to find those words and extrapolate them when I needed them. And at first it was really hard and it was slow. It was not a bill by the hour, it was a bill by the project. And some days when I was having a hard day and I couldn't come up with the words, I would just wait and I would do it the next day. I never had two really bad days in a row, thankfully. And when your brain is tired, it shuts down. It shuts down everything but the autonomic systems. And so when you are only functioning on the systems that keep you alive, you realize how fortunate we are when the body works as it's intended. And until I had my brain injury, I completely took my entire body and my systems for granted.
I think what you shared is just so powerful because just to build off of what you're saying right now, a lot of people don't think about it, but we don't tell our heart how many times to beat a minute. We don't tell our lungs how to operate. We don't tell the rest of our organs how to function. That all goes on in the background on top of us racing to work, going to Starbucks, going to the grocery store, cooking dinner. We do so much stuff with our body, and this thing's running all on its own. We don't have to tell it
Hmm.
what to do. And to go through a brain injury, though, the way that you did, and lose that independence in many ways, and realize, geez, I can't cook, and it's not because I can't do it. It's the fact my brain is so tired and so hurt from trauma that it just literally can't process those basic things. It just can't.
Oh,
And
it took me months to be able to cook, months. And I remember when I first started to cook again, I went back and lived on my own again. And my girlfriend came over to help me, and she was just there to supervise me and keep me on track and to make sure everything went well and safely. And but it was so taxing. And I wanted to go into culinary arts. So I mean, I love to cook, I love to bake. I was really good at it, and it's come back. But when I first started to cook again, it was painful. I just thought there's no way I'm going to be able to regain what I had been and be able to do this again and enjoy it without it really just taking me down. And no, now I'm 9 years post that big accident, and I I can focus on a recipe, and it doesn't take me like rereading, rereading. Wait, what was that step? I mean, that's what it was like the very first time I started cooking again. I couldn't remember step one. I'd walk away and I'd be like, what was step one? It was painful. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your grief journey because you built such a strong picture in my head of, and I'm still trying to imagine what that was like to literally not be able to do those basic functions of life that we all take for granted every day. To really, like you said, looking at a recipe book, I can't imagine how hard that would be for something that was so easy and so common every day for you that you've been doing for years to become something that all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is taking me 10 times longer than I used to. And there had to have been so much like frustration inside and then trying to find where I'm leading to is, where do you find acceptance in that journey of this is just where I am and I have to accept that my mind and my body right now are two separate entities and they're not wanting to cooperate at this moment.
Absolutely. The very first thing I had to learn was humility. I had to be humble. I had to ask for help in every aspect of my life. It was not just this one area. I mean, I needed help in everything. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't drive. I couldn't get myself to appointments. I couldn't walk. I couldn't talk. I had to ask for a lot of help. And so I had to accept that I needed help. I had to accept that I was no longer the version of myself that I had known. I had zero personality. My personality was flatlined. And I remember talking to my neurologist and asking her, I'm telling her, I missed me. I miss my personality. I miss my vivaciousness. I miss my sparkle. I miss my twinkle. And and she said, it will come back. Give it time. Be patient. So there's another word. I had to accept that her words, that she knew what she was saying were true. I had to believe that it was possible. And I had to accept that I could heal. And I had to be patient. So a lot of acceptance, a lot of patience, a lot of humility. Because when we're high, like me, high achievers and driven people, and in my family, we would joke, my dad and I would say, we get more done by 10 a.m. than most people do all day. And all of a sudden, I couldn't function. I wasn't achieving. I was struggling I could get myself dressed, I could brush my teeth, I could remember these things. But when I'd walk into a room, I didn't know why. And so to be able to know there was something drastically wrong with me and to be able to focus on being determined and to take that drive that I had, that I still had, that was still part of my personality at the core, and to be able to focus on what steps do I need to take to heal? How do I get to be the best version of this new version of me that I can be so that I can determine if I can go back to running my company, if I need to change my career, if I am going to live at on a meager disability income. All of these things were in my mind. And I said, I have to give myself a year. And I didn't care how much it spent or how much it cost me or what I spent or what my debt was. Because without getting to that place that I needed to be in a year, none of the other stuff mattered. It didn't matter if I was broke. It didn't matter if I had a huge amount of debt because I needed to see where I could be so that I could earn money or accept this new version of myself. And as you can see, I'm high functioning. Most people still, when they find out about this, they don't even they are surprised. And to date, I've had 19 brain injuries. So I'm like a combination of the Energizer Bunny and Timex.
That is a great analogy for
Yeah.
you. And And I can't imagine 'cause I'm also very high functioning in many ways. And when the high functioners get knocked down, especially that hard where we can't even do the basics of our life, that is a fight internal struggle that is very finding acceptance and having patience like you described. I struggle with that in many ways in certain areas of my life where I just am like, I don't accept this and I don't have patience for this. It's gotta happen. And I think a lot of people don't that aren't high functioning don't understand how detrimental that is to us, and we have to find our way back. That's the other, I think, driving factor about people like you and me is we don't just sit there and in many ways just accept that this is just who we are. We're looking forward, saying, how can we get back here? How can we get back to ourselves? And I think that drive is what really pushes us and keeps us going back to who we really are.
I believe in rising forward. I don't subscribe to the comeback analogy because I don't want to go back to the place that I was that I didn't like. And so I
Mhm.
teach my people, my clients that, what I practice is I rise forward. When something terrible happens to me, I go through it, I cope, I figure out how to move forward, and then I rise. And actually, I have a 5R framework for getting through adversity, and we'll circle back to that.
I love to touch base on that. I love your concept of rise up versus the comeback because I think, I caught onto it recently. My wife follows somebody who's had multiple children, and there's people that go on there and there's body shame and get back to your pre-pregnant self. And this woman, I loved her so much because it's why I'm with you about the comeback story. She said, I'm not going to be the same woman I was before this child. I'm a new person. My body's a new version of myself. I'm never going to go back to that person. And she went on this whole thing to say that if we're always chasing this past version of ourselves and we're trapping ourselves in that identity, we never really find out where our greatness sits. We never find out who we can become, and we don't even give ourselves the opportunity to do so. And I relate that a lot to grief journeys on my podcast a lot. I see people who are one version here. We went through child loss or brain injury or loss of something from cancer. We go through these horrible things in life and we come out the other end a completely new, different person. And in my opinion, from the people I've met on my podcast, better versions of ourselves. We've grown, we've changed, we've evolved. And I think that that's something powerful testament to resilience.
It is, and I love that what you said. It's becoming that better version, or this new version of ourselves. We're never meant to be this one version of who we are. And when life tragedy happens to us, when what I call life's turbulence, anything, it could be losing a job, it could be losing a child, it could be, a death of another family member or friend or partner, it could be losing your pet. I mean, anything that's traumatic event. Forgot my train of thought. Oh,
That's okay.
these events, when these events happen to us, they're part of our journey. They're teaching moments. These crucible moments are teaching us that we have a choice. We have a choice to try to hang on to the person we once were. We have the choice to be stuck in this new position we're in of misery and self pity, or we can choose to move forward and become this new version of ourselves that we were meant to be as a result of this life event that happened to us.
And I think that that's a hard choice for some of us. I definitely know when we talk about grief on my podcast, there's people that oftentimes tell me about going through depression for years. I certainly did it after losing a child. And, but there's always this moment I've caught in everybody's story where they reach a certain point. I always like to call it a breaking point, and everybody has one. Some people have it way out there in the distance, other people have it very quickly. But what I've noticed is something changes, like you said, we end up not sitting in our grief and our sorrow and our woe is me, our pity party we all do, but we find this moment where we say, you know what, I've lived in this long enough, I deserve more. I don't have to be defined by what happened to me, but I can make something of this circumstance. And I love that I've met so many individuals who've gone through very difficult moments of life. That grief journey has been 5, 10 years, if that, but they create some legacy work and reinvent themselves. And it's just such a powerful transformation to go from that place of a low to a new high that only could have ever happened if you did go through a tragedy or a loss of that nature that made you reinvent your identity.
Yes, and this identity is so important because it's what we tie ourselves to, and it's the decisions that we make moving forward with this new identity. I think that's so powerful.
Yeah, because grief as I've come to find is really an identity shift for us. And the reason I talk about it so much and I found myself in this space is because I saw that when we're able to integrate grief into our life, when we're able to integrate all these experiences, and coming from two high achievers, when we have a ski mogul brain injury accident, that's a big setback for us. That's like pulling off all of our identity, who we are. We're going, now, wait a second here. I can't give all that up. I can't accept this. I can't just say this is going to be the end of my story. And I think it's so powerful when we have those moments of trauma because it does slow us down in a lot of ways of life where we start stripping back the things that aren't working for us, the things that are no longer serving us. As you said about the version of ourself, maybe that pre-Jenna version isn't who you'd want to be today in many ways. And to give yourself, I know trauma gave it to you involuntarily, but it gave you that opportunity to truly step into who you're becoming. And I think that we can say it now, not in the moment, as I like to preface, but we're grateful for those experiences later on. And we say, had it not been for that, I wouldn't be who I am today.
Absolutely. And it's everything that's happened in my life has brought me closer to that version of who I'm supposed to be. Everything's been a stepping stone, and the traumatic brain injury and what I learned about neuroplasticity, what I learned about the brain, what I learned about healing the brain helped me with the understanding of my partner and his alcohol addiction. And this will be a good segue into my grief story because what I learned about neuroplasticity and what I learned about what happens to the brain with alcohol addiction is they're related. The symptoms that I felt and I experienced with a brain injury were similar with acute alcohol abuse, like AUD, alcohol use disorder is what they call it, AUD.
Mm.
And it helped me with this understanding. I couldn't relate to him and his alcohol problem, but I could relate to the symptoms and the problems that the excessive alcohol was causing in his brain. And because I could relate to that, even though mine were caused by hitting my head and his was caused by the excessive alcohol, we had similar issues going on in our life. And that allowed me to relate to him in a way that I wouldn't have been able to relate to. It allowed me to be more compassionate. I had a lot more empathy and understanding about the addiction because of how the brain was functioning, how his brain was changing. And I had to go into therapy before he died. I went in to see a therapist because I didn't understand what relationship was like with someone with an addiction because all the rules of relationships were thrown out the window. And so I had to have an alcohol addiction certified therapist working with me so I could understand why was this different? I'm not dealing with the same kind of a relationship as, if you're with somebody who's in a healthy mindset. And addicted minds are they're mind games, and you think this is happening, and then all of a sudden your head swivels and you're like, whoa, I didn't see that. And you're constantly like, you think this is the way it is, and then all of a sudden there's this, and you're just like that. And so a year before Michael died, I was in this intensive therapy. I needed to be able to understand what it was like to be in a relationship with someone with an addiction. I needed to understand how I could help throw him the life preserver and keep my feet safely on the shore and not letting him, every time I helped him, throw me into the whitewater with him. And so I had this jump start. And so let's see, my accident was 2017 and Michael died 2021. So I had 4 years. I had 3 years of post traumatic brain injury like life. So that first year was my full dedicated year of recovery. The second, third, and fourth years, I was working on financial recovery, spiritual recovery, physical recovery, emotional recovery. And then Michael and I were together, and we had this relationship that was, it was loving, but it wasn't consistent because of the addiction. He never drank in our home. He would run away or move out to relapse because he didn't want to face me. He didn't want me to see him in that state, even though I would see him when he would ask for help with withdrawal. And so, after many patterns of this, he had moved out again, and he was about 3 hours away. And the day that he died, I knew that he had relapsed again, and he had alcohol withdrawal fueled hallucinations, which led to ultimately when we knew he had suicide ideation. We went down the route of choosing help without going to him personally. And he declined the welfare check. So we went back to the drawing board and we asked for a psych hold. And when the EMTs came to help him, he knocked on the door, said just a minute, and took his own life. They had to break down the door, not the phone call anybody wants. So 4 years later, now I'm at an emotional like gut, like the worst of my life had happened at that moment. And I thought that the traumatic brain, we go through things like I thought my divorce was going to be the hardest thing for me. I thought my traumatic brain injury was going to be the hardest thing I had to go through in my life. I lost my service animal 10 weeks before Michael died. Everybody thought I was going to lose my shit. I didn't. I had a goal. I was rehabbing my hip. And I knew that once I got off my crutches, off the walker, off the crutches, I could, work on getting a new dog. And so that was my goal. So I was focused on a goal. And then Michael died and my life shattered. I just, dark sadness. I just couldn't stop crying. I was just, I was lost. I had no reason to get out of bed. And this lasted for a very short time because someone intervened and said, "Jana, you've got this chow chow. I'm a chow chow crazy girl. I love chows." And my home was empty. It had been 10 weeks since I'd lost Lucy, and Lucy was my devoted companion. She went everywhere with me. I mean, like everywhere. Restaurants, flights. She was even in the St. Louis Arch. I mean, this dog went everywhere with me. She would sit on the tennis court and watch me play tennis. She was just this great dog. So anyway, I had a hole in my heart and a vacancy in my home. And this gal who'd worked with me in chow rescues before, she called. She says, "Hey, Jenna, you got a dog in your backyard. I think you should go look." So I reluctantly went. I got myself up, went. Well, 45 minutes later, there's big black chow chows in my car. And I just said, "Mickey," well, this wasn't, his going home name was something else. And I said, "This is the story of us." And I meant it. And it was. And he taught me resilience and I taught him resilience. And together we healed our wounds. He was grotesquely abused and damaged. And we worked together. And he brought giggles to me. He brought joy to me. I was able to see when I couldn't see joy, I was able to see the simple joy of going for a walk through his eyes. I could see what it meant to him, his freedom. I could see looking through him how I was looking at my own life and he was able to show me a way to see my life. And one day when we were walking, it hit me. Michael chose to end his life. I had a choice too. I had a choice. Was I going to wallow in this sadness and this self-pity, this missing him and all of the things that our life wasn't going to be? Or was I going to rediscover this new person and forge a new way and learn how to find joy and live fully? And I know that is what he wanted for me. He wanted that for me when when he was alive. And so I made that choice right then and there that I was going to choose joy. I was going to rediscover how to live fully and joyfully. And it was all because I had Mickey. And Mickey is obviously an homage to Michael in the naming convention, but that's that's my grief story. And I used what I learned in, like I said, neuroplasticity and resilience coming from, not being able to walk, not being able to talk, not having that short-term memory, to being able to deal with my relationship, my turbulent relationship with Michael and his addiction, and then using what I learned with those experiences to when I lost Michael and I had to navigate that deep, dark, gray, and not even just abyss of grief. And when you have a stigma surrounding death, and I had suicide and I had substance abuse, both of these are taboo in our society. Society doesn't even know how to deal with people in a loss. They just grief. People are like, you know what I mean? People mean well. They say things that you just cringe, and they think they're saying it out of the kindness of their heart to be helpful, and it's it's the opposite, and you're just like, wow, I just can't believe you just said that. Clearly you haven't lost anyone. So Ian, when you have these losses and these big events in our life, we learn. These events are brought to us because they're meant to be a teaching moment and to help us grow and evolve and help other people.
That's beautifully said, Jenna. And I couldn't agree with you more that there's people out there that haven't walked our walk before. They haven't had the losses we've gone through. And we have a lot of those moments where we say, wow, did you really just say that to me? Or my God, I can't believe that. And I think in many ways it's hard for us is when we go through grievance and experiences. And I'll be very honest with you. I've not lost somebody to suicide. I don't know what that's like. I've heard from people that have. It's its own unique niche in grief. I'll say that, and it's a very
Hmm.
different thing than what society tells us and talks about. As you said, society treats it as a taboo, and there's actually a lot more behind the scenes of that type of loss in particular. But where I'm going with that is I think, as you said, these are teachable moments. And I try to teach people that if you haven't gone through a traumatic brain injury, if you haven't been around somebody with addictions before, or somebody who's lost someone to suicide or lost a child like me, for example, because I hear it all the time, see these people not just because of what happened to them, but see them as people you can learn from, people that you can talk to. You don't have to, be awkward and uncomfortable around them or be like, oh, it's better off for you to say things like, I just don't know what to say. What can I do to help you? What can I do to support you right now? Or, and just try to be there for somebody. And I always try to say lead with empathy because at the end of the day, we don't know what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes. We really don't. And,
Right.
I can always say I've talked to a lot of lost parents in particular. We've all lost children, but I'll tell you this, we all lost it in a different way. We all experienced it in a different fashion. We all learned something that maybe one of us didn't learn. That always happens. And I think it's a beautiful gift of life when we can see tragedies like this, not as a bad, terrible thing or taboo subject, or don't talk about it because it's awkward and uncomfortable, but say this is a moment of connection. This is a moment of purpose and teaching. And maybe if I walk this journey besides this person, like you, Jenna, like I'm doing today, walk beside you, maybe I'll learn something from you. Maybe you'll end up helping me in a way I didn't expect. And that way we can live in gratitude and appreciation for what people go through.
Yes, we were not meant to walk this world and this journey alone. There's social support. I'm all choked up. Social support is so incredibly important, and it's one of the most important parts of what I teach in resilience is you have to have that social support, and we need to be caring and understanding and, like you said, lead with empathy because life is hard, and we need sometimes people to help us and pick us up when we're crumpled on the floor or we
Well, I
can't
think
get out of bed.
Yeah, and your story is a true testament to that. You being able to say when you had that brain injury that I needed to ask for help, and I'm sure that was uncomfortable for whatever degree, but you stepped out of your comfort zone and said, I need help, I need support. And I can't imagine how grateful and appreciative you are to have that tribe of women around you that helped you through that period. I mean, And correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
in the pre-interview, didn't you tell me Lucy passed away while you were having surgery at the
Yeah.
same time?
Yeah, good call. Yes, that was the hip surgery I was talking about. Yeah, Lucy died. I went in for hip repair, not a hip replacement. A hip repair has a 1 year recovery period, and I went under for the anesthesia, and we timelined it back after, in hindsight. But it was when I went under anesthesia, my Lucy decided she's gone, so my job is done, and that I mean, when they called me, my mom called and she wanted to make sure the nursing staff, did I tell you this already? The
I don't
nursing
know that you
staff,
did.
yeah, so the nursing staff, she wanted the nursing staff in the room so that when she told me that Lucy died, I would be surrounded by people. And let me tell you, I yelled out like this most guttural, no, just right? Just my girl. Who's been through everything with me. And just then, all the white coats and all the nurses just bombarded in my room. And when they realized I was technically okay and what had happened, then people, left and tended to their business again. But yeah, and then 10 weeks later, I lost Michael. So it's like I went through a lot in a really short amount of time. And, but the fun didn't stop. So I think it was 2, 3 weeks after Michael died. Um, our shared home flooded and there was a burst pipe and I had to move out. And the night before I
Jeez.
was supposed to return, I got a phone call from the maintenance crew. I'm like, this is not a good sign. And he informed me that another pipe burst and it was worse than the previous flood. And I never lived in our shared home again. So all of this happened, I'm going to say about 12, 13 weeks. Hip surgery, Lucy dying, Michael dying, home flooding, not once, but twice. So, and then being homeless, like displaced, and everything is just a mess. So, yeah,
That's
I know all about grief and resilience and you do what you got to do in these moments. And that was the other thing. I didn't have the luxury of like going through Michael's things. We had a window of time. We had to get everything cleared out with his family. I had a finite window of getting out of my condo. I didn't have the luxury that some people in my grief groups had of I don't have to clean out my loved one's things. I don't have to move out of my home. I didn't have these things forced me to be resilient because I was in survival mode at that point. And I think that my survival mode was instrumental in part of my grieving process. I mean, I had to fast track a lot of the grieving process because I was in survival mode with the hip, the dog. And then when I got Mickey, and I was in my rehab for my hip and then I found another place to stay. Then things kind of stabilized. But by then, my new normal was I had this silly boy and he'd look at me. Do you remember that in our pre-meeting?
yeah. I remember
Hello?
that.
Hello? Hello? I was so scared, the first night he was with me that he was I didn't trust that he was going to be a good boy. And the next morning he started looking at me like this. And then out of nowhere, that voice came from within me. And the whole time Mickey was alive, he had that voice. And he was a smart dog, but he was a character. And then to close this Mickey circle and grief, Mickey died a year and a half ago. And it
Oh,
was sudden. And he had nerve damage and he was in a lot of pain and it was becoming well, let's just say we had a lot of people in the Mickey Bite Club. So it became a time that he had to find the Rainbow Bridge and live his best years flying around. And so when I spent time with him and made sure that he knew he was loved, and the time came for me to take him to the vet and send him on his way. That brought back a lot of grief for me with losing Michael because Mickey was my healing dog. Mickey was so healing and he taught me so much about finding that joy that I revisited my grief losing Michael. And as you can tell, even today, losing Mickey associates my grief with losing Michael. And I have a new Chow Chow, but she's not in my office right now. She's somewhere else. But her name is Ellie, and she's my girl now. So I've got a new girl, and it just goes to show you though that life is full of surprises. We can find joy in the least likely places. We can find joy when we absolutely can't fathom that we might be able to. And we can be taken back to that moment of heartache and sadness and experience it and emote and know that it's not going to take us to this deep, dark place of sadness or bitterness because it's part of our healing journey. And once we go through that healing journey, just now, like you saw me getting all choked up and emotional about the tie to losing Michael when I lost Mickey, but it's doesn't change anything. I'm still who I am today, and I didn't lose ground just because I cried and
You
reflected
showed
on
us that
that.
it's okay for us to have these moments, and that's what I appreciate about you sharing your experience today, because a lot of people try to hold that in and suppress it and hide it and ignore it. And to realize that we're human, and
Hmm.
that's part of being human is having emotions. Part of being a human is having these experiences. And I really appreciate you sharing your story about Mickey, by the way, because pet loss is something I'm trying to raise awareness of because I've met too many people in my journey with pets that have just said, "Oh, it's just a pet and it's just an animal." And I go, I hate to tell you this, but I've not met many people. I
Yeah.
have rabbits, and I went to the vet yesterday, and there's a gal that might lose her rabbit to a twisted intestine, and this
Mm,
woman rescued it. And to that point, animals create a connection for us because they are very animals are very unconditional with their love is what I want to share with that. Us as humans, we talk back to one another. We express ourselves not in good ways half the time, and the other time we're struggling to understand each other. But pets only know to show us love. That's the only thing they know how to do. And we show them love by how we take care of them. And so I wanted to share it with you because I think it'd be powerful, and I'll share it with listeners who are listening to this episode. We are in your pet's life, their entire life, from the time
yeah.
they're born to the time they die. They're with us, by the way, a very short period of our life. And so when you can think about the context of that and the amount of time you're spending with that animal, to know that that purpose is bigger and deeper, to know that it's not just an animal, that it's something
Yeah.
that loves you unconditionally and is there for you in moments, as Jenna described today, being part of her healing journey from losing her ex-husband. And when we can understand that pets fill the void for us in those moments, that's why it's so hurtful when they pass and we have to put them down. It's not because it's just an animal. That animal was with us through a very difficult time of life, and they created some stability, some unconditional love, and they met our needs in a way that some people can't meet, and that's okay. But I want us just to honor pet loss in that respect because Jenna, your story with Mickey is a prime example of how important pets are for us.
They are. They're furry family members. I can't even say it. They're furry family members, and they are children. In a way, they're our best friend. They're a child. And for the people who don't have children, these pets are those children to them. And so, yeah, discounting someone's pet loss is a sad thing because it hurts. It hurts a lot. And I do want to do a little correction. Michael was my partner. We were not divorced. We weren't married. We were we were life partners. So,
I love that.
little
Well,
correction on that. My
Well, Jenna.
ex-husband's my ex-husband's still alive and well.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Well, my apologies for that.
No, that's okay.
Um,
Just for the listeners.
yeah. Well, Jenna, as we wrap up the podcast real quick, I wanted to see if you could tell us really briefly about the 5 R's that you came up with, because you alluded to that a little bit earlier today, and I'm personally curious what those 5 R's are.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked me, and I'm pulling it up in front of me so I don't make a mistake. You
That's
know,
okay. We're human.
I get tongue-tied sometimes, but so there are 5 R's, and the first one is recognizing, and a lot of us have already heard this one already before. You know, recognizing, just being aware of a problem. That's the first step. Reframing is the second R. This is where you shift how you see what's happening to you. Instead of saying, I'm failing, you say, I should be able to handle this, right? I mean, instead of saying that, you say, this is not a character flaw. I need support, not more pressure. You just reframe things. And one reframe that I have in my life, and I'll tie it to my brain injury, is I was a hot yogi before my brain injury. I would often do it 1 to 2 times a day. I would do 60 and 90-minute sessions. I would play tennis. I would do all this in one day. Well, I can still play tennis. I can still do the 26 static poses in the Bikram style yoga, but I cannot go into a hot yoga studio. My brain just scrambles with the heat, and I I go, I'll have a seizure. I malfunction. My brain shuts down. So what I do say, so my reframe is I can do the 26 static postures in the comfort of my own home or outside. That's a reframe, and that's exactly a reframe with adversity. Reset is the third R, and this is where you just let your central nervous system take a beat. Even taking 90 seconds, it will reset your central nervous system. It will de-escalate anything that's going on. And breathing and just for 90 seconds. Ignore everything else. The world will not collapse in 90 seconds. Rebuild is your fourth R. And this is where you kind of reassemble your life and rebuild. And one of the things I like to say is I love R's. Apparently, I'm a writer. Alliteration is great. Reclaim my mantra, or reclaim my life was my mantra. And this is so the fourth R is rebuild, and you start putting things back together, but you become this different version. And you do it with creating small steps, progress over perfection. And that's where you build your stability. And then the fifth R is rise. And this is where you integrate everything. And remember how I said I don't believe in comebacks? I believe in rising forward because we want to rise stronger. You don't want to go back to that version of yourself that you were. I mean, nobody wants to go back to a painful part in their life. So you want to move forward with intention, and you want to be able to trust yourself. And so that's where you start rising by integrating everything that we've done. And then one thing I want to tell you is most people try to skip that step between recognize and rise. And that's when things don't stick. So if you repeat these 5 R's in the order, recognize, reframe, reset, rebuild, rise, then you integrate all of that together. And that's when you can reclaim. You can reclaim your life.
That's beautiful, Jen. I appreciate you sharing the 5 R's with us today. And
Thank
for
you.
listeners, I recommend rewinding this thing back to when she started telling us about this. This was very helpful advice if you are in the throes of grief, if you feel stuck in grief, even if you feel like you're just not sure what that next small step forward is in your healing journey. And trust me, I've been there. It's a hard place. This is great advice for you guys to figure out what that next first step can be for you. And yeah.
I have two more things that I think are helpful. The first is grief is not a place we stay. We're never meant to stay there. So I want everyone to really take that to heart. Be compassionate with yourself in your grief journey, but remember, grief is not a place to stay. It's a place that we go with, that we experience and we move through. And the second thing is when you think of resilience, I want you to think of this. Resilience is the bridge. The bridge that takes you from whatever traumatic event you're experiencing right now in your life to the place you want to be, your desired outcome, whatever it is. That is resilience. This is your, I'll say it again. This is the traumatic event you're in. This is the place you want to be. And this is resilience, that bridge that gets you from one point to the other point.
I love that. Jen, I appreciate you sharing everything that you did today. It was absolutely incredible. And I just have to say, I'm so impressed to be talking to somebody who has gone through a severe brain injury, multiple compound losses of grief, and you've become this person that you are today. It's truly an inspiration for listeners and myself, by the way, that we can go through the hardships of life that are in no way easy, and we can come out the other side a whole different person that's resilient and strong and capable of handling whatever comes next in life. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Chris, for having me. Thanks for offering this podcast to everybody because, grief is a hard thing. Grief is a beast. That's what I say. Grief is a beast, and we all need the support. So thank you for everything that you do and weaving resilience into your podcast.
Well, I want to thank all of you listeners today for joining Jenna and I on today's episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Jenna's story. If you've been feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure how to move forward in your grief, you don't have to figure it out alone. I do offer free grief clarity calls so we can talk through what you're experiencing and help you understand what's going on beneath the surface so you guys can find a clear path forward. You can book your call at empowergriefjourney.com. I want you guys to know you can also explore past episodes and subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Podbean. So definitely check out those other conversations so you don't miss them. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know that you're never alone in this, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.